again, thank you so much for joining our community of culture geeks, as we like to call them. And now I am excited to intro Pete Savage, who is the CEO of CultureShape. CultureShape is a company that helps CEOs, chief people officers, and HR leaders organize and execute high impact, tangible culture programs. Pete is a 25-year veteran of the marketing industry and brings an agency approach to culture so that people and culture leaders can finally enjoy the same level of strategic planning and support and professional client service that marketing professionals have enjoyed for the past 100 years. As a sought-after consultant to CEOs and CMOs, Pete has conceived and delivered successful marketing strategies and campaigns for companies like 3M, HP, Motorola, as well as a ton of other medium-sized companies throughout North America. Pete and his co-founder Greg at CultureShape also gave us these awesome journals that you'll see here. Castelli from Italy. They're customized for our events, for our attendees this year, and just beautiful journals that I use every day. Pete is also the co-author of the Culture Wheel Playbook. Definitely recommend this. It's a quick read, but super tangible and actionable insights in there. So definitely recommend heading to their website and grabbing a copy of the Culture Wheel Playbook. So with that, I'll stop talking, turn it over to Pete. Pete, thanks again for being here.
Thank you, Zach and Nick, and thanks everybody for turning up today or watching on replay. It's always an absolute pleasure to talk to our fellow colleagues in the Culturecon community. So, gonna get right into it today. I always seem to have a lot to kind of dive into content-wise when I'm talking to the Culturecon group. So, let's just dive in here and see how quickly we can get through this, hopefully info-packed session. So today we're going to be talking about the 10 culture planning pitfalls to avoid in 2026. Going to go through some common pitfalls and a little bit of a cue as to the trap that some people may fall in. You may find that you are falling into some of these traps, or maybe someone on your team is. And hopefully we can provide a little bit of in this webinar advice on how to fix the situation, but also I would really like to encourage everyone to, after the webinar, use some of the free content that I'm going to be pointing you to, which is more of a action step, action guide approach to some of the topics we're going to talk about here. So hopefully that's a nice comprehensive approach so that you don't find yourself in any of these pitfalls throughout the year. Thanks for the intro, Zach. As everyone mentioned, I'm Pete Savage, CEO and co-founder of CultureShape, co-author of the Culture Wheel Playbook. And at CultureShape, we help HR leaders run higher impact culture initiatives for less cost and at lower risk. And that looks like getting more impact out of your existing culture budget, running your culture initiatives from planning and personalizing to local and global rollout and delivery. And then we're a partner for total accountability for final delivery to your people. Before we get going, I know that in the CultureCon community, a lot of people have a copy of our book already, the Culture Wheel Playbook. We tend to give out physical copies at the CultureCon live events. And if you have one, great. I'm going to be referencing some of the more detailed content in there. If you don't have a copy, I'd love for you to help yourself to a free digital copy, either now or at the end of the webinar, and you can grab that at cultureshape.co playbook. So when I mention the playbook throughout the webinar, it's not a shameless plug because we're not selling it. I just want to give deeper, longer lasting, tangible action steps you can take so that, again, we can avoid some of these pitfalls. So on that note, I'm just going to say, look for some of these tags throughout the slides today where I make a specific reference to where the content goes deeper, typically to include a methodology, a framework, an action guide from the Culture Wheel Playbook. That's an 87-page playbook. It's super, super brief, super dense, and super actionable. So let's get into that. 10 culture planning pitfalls. Let's start with number one. Pitfall number one is a hyper dependency on tech. And some of these topics, just at a glance, some of these pitfalls are perhaps potentially controversial. So I want to explain each one a little bit. And I want to say for this one, we're not dissing tech or in any way encouraging anyone in HR or in the culture sphere to move away from tech. Absolutely not. We use tons of tech tools ourselves. But there is a real issue out there in terms of hyper dependency on tech, and it's not an issue or a topic that we've made up. Basically, I'm going to show you what others say about this. So the trap is overinvestment or over optimizing areas that maybe you don't need to due to excitement and expectations simply being too high in terms of what the tech tool is going to solve for you. And like I mentioned, this is a kind of a phenomena that I would encourage you to look up a little bit. And one resource I'd point you in the direction of is Gardner. They conceived this, you can see this kind of roller coaster time frame about the hype cycle for human capital management. And this was back in 2021 that Gartner conceived this. And at that time, they projected that in 2 to 5 years, which is kind of where we find ourselves now, HR tech or human capital management, that sort of broader category, is going to find ourselves in, and I love this term, the trough of disillusionment. You can see that at the bottom of that red box there. And it really is just their take on what I explained in the previous slide, which is we start with an innovation trigger, what's possible in tech. We then move into inflated expectations that the technology solution is going to solve all our problems. And then we unfortunately crash into the trough of disillusionment. So that's just kind of a caveat to how you might approach technology in terms of how it fits into your strategy and your planning for your people and your culture. Um, like I say, it's a real phenomena. These aren't facts that we're kind of making up. These are true facts. If you look back into 2013, you could have a universe of about 125 roughly HR tech companies. Now this is what that logo slide looks like in 2023, actually. It's not even accurate for today. This was 3 years ago. So the landscape has exploded for HR tech and human capital tech. And so just with that comes a lot of perhaps over expectations. You might have noticed this in your own organization. You might have noticed that you have implemented tools and you only use a sliver or a portion of it. Or you may find that your tech stack is really, really dialed in. And if that's the case, it's probably because it's doing a great job helping you deliver on the strategic reasons for implementing the tech in the first place. So that just leads us into the fix here, which is just because we can do something with technology doesn't automatically mean that we should. You might find that you're over optimizing an area of your organization that really isn't worth it. There could be money better spent elsewhere. And I would just like to encourage everyone to be more excited about the strategy that the tech is going to help you deliver on than the tech itself. So let's move on to pitfall number 2, which is sending out weak culture signals. Now, just a quick definition. Anything that the organization delivers to its employees to engage, appreciate, encourage, educate, or incentivize, whether these are physical or digital initiatives, is a culture signal. And you can see some examples on the screen there. But not all culture signals are equal. Some are quite high impact and some are lower impact. And that just comes with experience and year after year, quarter after quarter, trying out different initiatives and programs and seeing what's resonating and what isn't. So you need to know your weakest culture signals. When you do that, you're going to be able to identify them and then reallocate budgets to the programs that you really want to do. So why is this a pitfall? Is because the trap is sometimes with how busy we all are, sometimes it doesn't occur to us or to prioritize taking the time to identify weak and strong culture signals. And the fix for that is to basically audit your current culture programs and the programs that you have planned for the balance of the year. And identify your weakest signals and perhaps reallocate that spend. And so you can do this just kind of intuitively. Like oftentimes when we're talking to folks and we bring up the idea of culture signals and we say, not all culture signals are equal and some kind of fall flat or don't have a high as impact as you're expecting. Usually people have had an experience like that and one or two things that are lower impact or mediocre impact kind of come to the forefront of their minds. So intuitively, you may know what some of those weaker signals are. And I would encourage you to call those out and really look at them and consider maybe defunding them and trying something new, trying a new culture program or initiative that you've heard about or that you really want to do, that you feel might align more holistically with your people strategy. So this is a call out to chapter 2. When we hand the live book out, the physical book out, we have a bookmark that basically says, be sure to read chapter 2. If you don't read anything else in the Culture Wheel Playbook, read chapter 2 because that shows you a detailed methodology on how to distinguish a weak culture signal from a strong one, to actually put a scoring metric to it, put some numbers to it, and then prioritize that categorization. And that's usually a revelation for a lot of folks. They appreciate going through that exercise. So I just want to point that out as a takeaway that you can look at doing after the webinar. Let's go to pitfall number 3, which is staying in the shadows. So sometimes it's due to the relative newness of the culture role, the culture department, the team. Culture can be kind of still finding its footing, and as a result, it may be just a little bit too much under wraps internally. It may not in your organization have as prominent or as high a profile as you really want it to have yet. Part of the opportunity in for culture champions is to elevate that prominence and that role. But you can't really do that without actually getting out there, championing and advocating for culture. So the fix to staying in the shadows is to get out there and have conversations, to educate, to inform others of your culture plan and also your results. And that's an important thing to get into the habit of doing because the knock-on effect of not doing that is that when it comes time to have higher level budget discussions and open up new budgets or allocate new budgets for culture programming, the biggest risk is that if the profile of culture within the organization isn't reaching those rooms where those decisions are made, then you can pretty much guarantee that the culture effort is going to be under-resourced. And some people on the call may have had an experience like that before, where if your organization, if your department that you're working in, if your functional area is under-resourced, it gets really, really difficult to make those budget dollars work, have the impact that you're having, and really establish the culture movement, I'll say, as something that's a going concern and a legitimate strategic aspect of the organization. So the true reality here, the real reality is that by keeping culture a little bit under wraps, that elevated profile is not going to happen on its own. So it comes down to the people on this call to get out there and have those conversations. The easiest way to put yourself out there and to share your culture planning and results is with the culture wheel. And I'll just take a minute to explain this because this is a real live culture wheel that a client is using. We've all, of course, seen the Gantt charts and project plans that detail maybe a year's worth of programming or get into details on specific relational steps between executing a program with milestones and dependencies and start and stop dates. And that level of detail is fine at the execution level. You may have that level of detail going on within your role and within your team. But when you're sharing the culture team's vision or plan for the year, we really encourage everyone to do it in a way that is much more high level and much more simple for other folks that are outside of the culture function to look at and latch onto and instantly and easily understand. And so the culture wheel is essentially just a visual calendar where you take your strongest culture signals that you have planned for the year and you plot them around the outside of the wheel. The wheel represents a full calendar year. And once you do that, you have a real easy way of looking at, do we have balanced programming going on throughout the year? You can include kind of those lead up arrows that let people know this is when the actual culture initiative is being launched. But if you follow that arrow back, this is when we're, as a culture team, beginning to plan and work on that. So this is where we'll be coming to you for support, resources, input, etc. And then if you start bringing this into your conversations and meetings with folks outside of the culture function, what you're going to be able to see is people start remembering what it is you're working on and what it is you're working towards. And it's a really nice feeling when inside the organization, others who aren't necessarily in the culture role begin using the language of the culture wheel. So they may be saying, hey, I know you've got another signal coming. And I noticed the last time you showed us the culture wheel, it was this or that. That's when you know you've really helped to elevate the understanding and the profile of culture within the organization. And believe it or not, you can do it with a very, very simple tool. Also, too, I should point out that I just read recently about one of the number one, actually the number one complaint in this survey that I was looking at of CEOs was that their people aren't simplifying when it comes to communication. It's like this onslaught of data that we all have now. People tend to be afraid to parse out or prioritize what's important and what's relevant when communicating with executives. So execs are now finding themselves in the position of having to wade through too much data or send reports or meetings back to say, I need this more simplified. I need you to bottom line this for me. It's kind of a common problem. So if you can take the initiative of being someone who has the detailed plan button down for your internal team, but also has a really slick and easy way to communicate that with a simple visual, then you're going to stand out as someone who knows what they're doing when it comes to communicating with executives and keeping them on board. And you'll start to see that when you have the support of the executive on board, obviously, it helps you avoid all the other pitfalls that we're going to keep going and get into. Chapters 4 and 5 in the book really go through how to build the culture wheel. And part of that is a culture wheel worksheet. So not going to go into this here. I just want you to know this is another free resource that's available to you that kind of takes you all the way around the outside of that wheel into 4 specific stages as to how to build it, how to budget for it, how to track your support, etc. Okay, pitfall number 4 is the idea of conflating culture spend with promo spend. Really, this is kind of summed up in one slide, which is when I share this usually live at a conference, you can see lots of heads nodding around the room, some chuckles, some kind of maybe audible gasps, which is the culture team is not the company swag department, and unfortunately, because a lot of what is done in culture gets translated into tangibles as it really should. The unfortunate part of that is it can easily just start to become more of a promo or a swag message unintentionally that kind of encroaches or overshadows the cultural merit of what you're trying to do and communicate to people. And so there's nothing wrong with swag and amazing, branded merch and onboarding packages and all those awesome things for sure. But the trap is to let the adrenaline of that, let the kind of dopamine and the sugar rush of cool swag crowd out the culture messaging, and it happens sort of step by step, but it does happen. We have people that feel like they're kind of viewed a little bit as the company swag department. And that's a big barrier when you're trying to put together programs and initiatives of high strategic merit and some that might require new or dedicated budgets. And you want to just kind of avoid that pigeonholing from taking place internally. And there are things you can do to do that. Absolutely. So one of the fixes that we have here is to audit your spend. Make sure that if there's money being spent in, say, an onboarding package or whatever it is that you have purview into, make sure you have enough of those dollars going into items of high cultural merit and not just, what we call logo slaps. And that's not derogatory in any way, but here's the logic and the actual truth behind that. If you're putting a amazing water bottle out there with your logo on it, that's awesome. And the branded socks and the t-shirts and all of that. There's nothing wrong with that. But it's also true that any company can do that. So you don't want to rest your culture messaging on something that's just a pure consumable that an employee can get the same kind of thing the next time they start another job at another organization. Like we're at a stage in culture now where as culture finds its footing, some of these growing pains in execution and feedback are starting to emerge. So we're always saying, let's address these things head on and let's take a real close look at the budget spend and make sure we're doing items of high cultural merit or strategic cultural merit. And that doesn't need to be complicated. In fact, it can be really simple. One example that Zach mentioned at the beginning of the call was he held up one of the journals, and a journal is a very effective way of putting an item of high cultural merit together because it can carry real estate and messaging that's important for company vision and mission throughout that journal. You could turn a journal into a workbook, for example. You could make it really, really deep and action oriented by including checklists and reminders. We have organizations who are using journals as one example to start their meetings, and everyone opens up, whether they're locally or um, globally disparately separated, whether they work from home, whether they're in different countries or cities, and they're starting opening their journal and reviewing the company values and things like that. So it's like, don't be afraid to be more creative and to take dollars that you would normally spend on something really, really cool. You can do something that's really cool, but also carries specific culture messaging. And if you do that, then you're going to begin to separate this idea that the culture team is the company swag department. So that leads us into the next issue here, which is a big one. Pitfall number 5 that we see sometimes is the culture team or some people in the culture role being a bit number shy. And the trap for that is that teams or roles or sometimes committees, because in some organizations there isn't a specific culture department or culture leader that's designated as that exclusively. In a lot of organizations, yours may be one, culture is brought together and grown through a cross section of a committee representing different functional areas of the organization. There's no right way or wrong way to set it up. It can work really well or not so well, regardless of what the setup is in the organization. But the common problem is that when you're putting culture programs and initiatives together, sometimes it's a struggle to link the spend to the impact. And so just a little bit of an aside as to what we're seeing now is we're starting to see more scrutiny coming into what's been called, culture spending or the culture movement or the culture budget. And so if you think about it just kind of logically, it does make sense. Culture is a relatively new functional, let's call it, area of an organization in terms of getting attention, getting on the executive priority list, and getting funding and resourcing. This is made evidenced by the number of folks who have been hired for culture specific roles. So if you go back a few years, we really saw that begin to expand and grow. Along with that came a lot of budgets and resources to kind of reinforce and support that movement. Um, and when anything is kind of new and it's got executive attention behind it, it can tend to get a lot of superchargers underneath it in terms of resources and budget dollars without a ton of scrutiny because everyone wants to see it do well. Everyone's excited about it. And it can kind of be a little loose in terms of scrutiny onto where you're spending your budget dollars and why. But because we've run through that for a few years now, you're starting to see organizations put more of an eye towards some of these culture programs. And that's just natural. It makes good business sense to say, okay, we've run a few of these things for a couple years now. What kind of impact are we having? And the culture team or leader might be asked, what can you show me or tell me about the impact? Give me a report on how we're tracking, how we're doing here. And those are important conversations because you want to be able to show results, but also you want to be able to validate the next culture budget request and really shoring that up for your ongoing support. And so the fix here, all that to say, it can be fixed to a great extent by using one simple sentence to put your culture spending in context. And that will help you prepare for the scrutiny that's coming. It will help you get ahead of it if you found that it hasn't directly come to your budget or your team yet. And that's the following sentence. So I encourage you to look for these three numbers inside your organization and to fill in the blanks and to really feel good about saying this sentence. So the sentence is, we're spending X, that's your culture budget, in order to preserve and support Y, that's your salaries expense, your company's totally salary expense, worth of talent. And this talent helps our organization generate revenues of, and then insert your organization's revenue number. So this is a really simple sentence. And these are numbers that you should readily be able to get and plug in. You're looking for your total culture spend. You're looking for what the organization spends on salaries, and you're looking for the organization's revenue. And if you don't know these exact numbers, you can get help. Someone in your organization will. Or there's ways to just use some benchmarks to get a close ballpark. And chapter 3 goes through a little bit of the really, really simple math to put this kind of a statement together. But imagine being able to say that. My question to everyone watching now would be, can you fill in those three blanks now and say that statement already? And if you can, that's great. And if you can, then I would encourage you to share that sentence and this knowledge with everyone else on the culture team so that they know these numbers. It just puts the culture team's effort into a business context and relates it to the day-to-day business realities of the organization. And no one outside of the culture movement is going to put this together for you. So it's kind of on your shoulders to get these numbers in and get this sentence something that you can suggest, for example, keep internally, print it out, put it on your wall. It's almost like a reason for being or a really strong, logically business-backed case for why the culture, function, or movement even exists within your organization. And then you want to share this externally. If you're in a situation where maybe you're meeting with someone who's having a discussion with you about budgeting and resourcing for the programs you want to do, you can offer this context to them to show them why you're looking for the kind of spend you're looking for, why you need the resources that you do, and see what kind of a response you get. Are you able to share this with your CFO or another leader? Or in some organizations, maybe you can share this with your president or your CEO. These are just other ways of getting out there and being proactive and driving these really important internal conversations about culture, some of them which involve numbers, and raising the profile and the knowledge and understanding of what the culture team is working on and doing and delivering on. So let's go into pitfall number 6, which is a common pitfall of having the wrong people around the table. Now, some of the issues that this revolves in we'll touch on in a second, but I just want to put a little example of an anecdote together. There's a billion-dollar tech company, and we tell this story in the book, that missed an opportunity to recognize 7,000 employees in person at an annual event. And it just so happens that this tech company had just spent a ton of money on media talking to the market at large about the importance of their culture. And they had video content, and they basically had done this massive, a lot of people wanted to work at this organization. They had done this massive push on why culture is important and just educating everyone outside of the company on what they're about. But when it came to the people inside the company, there was kind of a big ball drop here. And the reason is because there was too big of a knowledge gap between what they wanted to do and how to actually get it done. So in the book, we go into a little more detail on that, but just briefly, we know about this story because we were brought in to try and help to pull this out of the fire, and there just wasn't enough time left to do it. By the time it got to CultureShape, so much time had been kind of passed by before the right people were at the table to help with planning this. This was a recognition event. And it was heartbreaking to watch because it was like, gosh, if this was brought to us earlier, we could have helped this organization really knock things out of the park. And that's not to blame anyone or put anyone at fault. It's just that, we're all busy. And usually it's a timing thing where maybe you have a recognition event come up or some other important business initiative event, and you go too long internally before involving the expert support that you might need with planning or sourcing or manufacturing or packing or shipping or delivery. If like you were in this example, they wanted to do a tangible recognition. We always say that the fix here, culture teams have agencies too. We're one of them. So involve people like CultureShape early on when you're looking to build budgets, when you're looking to allocate what should our spend be throughout the year, when you're looking at timelines, and definitely when you're looking at rolling out, especially initiatives that have a tangible component. Because as soon as you talk about an idea of, we would like to put this in our employees' hands, there's a whole work back that needs to happen there. And so what you want is people in the industry that can make that happen. So having the right people, inviting the right people into the table early on is just going to be so beneficial to help you do that effectively and actually pull it off. Okay, pitfall number 7 is culture and HR being out of sync. If you look closely at the illustration there, though, those cogs are close, but they're not actually knit together. So if they're not knit together and they're not firing, then they're still independent. And we're seeing this happen now. I'd be curious if this to know from people on the organization if it's happening or on the call, if it's happening with your organization, is that culture in many ways is finding its footing right now. And a lot of the times it's still unclear, who owns culture? Where does it sit? Is it owned by HR? Is ownership the right word? Is it fully knit into HR? Is it operated by a committee? It's this era that we're in right now where, just the words culture and HR are finding themselves always together in the same sentence. And if you had this really buttoned down in your organization, that's great. But like I said before, a lot of this is evolving and it's still evolving. It's been evolving for a couple of years. And if there's people on the call who have, say, switched roles or switched companies, maybe we've got some people here already who've had different experiences in different settings where this was maybe in one place really worked well together and others there was a problem between the idea of culture and HR. In some organizations, culture is kind of just, given, let's say, to HR to sort of like run with, make culture happen, please. And it's kind of like, that might not be true in your organization, but if it is, you can understand how difficult and frustrating that can be. There's no real way to fix this without leadership and communication. Communication is key for this. As culture begins to find its footing and settle in inside organizations in an organized and programmatic way and functional way, those conversations have to revolve around addressing confusion and assumptions and conflict and just generally getting more face time, whether that's in-person FaceTime or online FaceTime between culture and HR, whether they're in separate departments or different people within the same functionality. It really, really needs to be addressed. And some of the things we talk about here and in the playbook are really built to help that communication happen and address that confusion and those assumptions. Next pitfall is recognition leaks. Here's the trap with recognition. It's one of the highest impact, highest, most efficient, and most effective initiatives that you can invest in culture. And why is because of the simple fact that when you publicly recognize someone for the performance or the behaviors or the demonstration of the values that you want to see, that naturally communicates what the culture is about, and you naturally get a knock-on effect and more of those behaviors, not only from that person, but from other people in the organization as well. Now, the issue is oftentimes people might say, yeah, we do recognition, and that's kind of here's what we do, and we do it. And I would encourage you to say, when's the last time we took a deep look at our recognition programs, our initiatives? Are we taking just kind of a status quo approach, kind of like we've always done this, so we keep doing it? Are we even taking an overly automated approach? We've talked to organizations before where a lot of recognition ends up taking place kind of inside the company store in the rewards program. And it's like, well, that's our recognition. People get points and they go and, they can get their coffee maker and everybody loves that. And I'm not, believe me, I'm addressing these points based on feedback and experience that we've seen and had out there. I'm not dissing any of these things, but this goes back to the over-reliance on tech, is that something as important and human with so as much writing on it as recognition, you don't just want that program to be kind of a rinse and repeat. You really want to take a look at innovation and recognition. One of the things we encourage people to do is that, you can kind of custom manufacture almost anything you can imagine. So, like I say, you can put your logo on the water bottle and the socks, and there's nothing wrong with that. I'm never going to say there's anything wrong with that. But you can also get really, really creative. Culture can be one of the most rewarding and creative areas inside an organization. And, I would encourage people, if you haven't, think about recognition in super creative ways and see what you can make or build, even at scale, to put in people's hands and really show them how much you value their contribution to the organization. And that will really go a long way to leveling up recognition and plugging any of those recognition leaks. We talk a lot about that in chapter 7, so I'd encourage you to read that. Pitfall number 9. This is one that you can really, really gain tons of momentum and tons of support for. The pitfall here is that culture is remaining separated from key business initiatives. You may have experienced this in your organization where the organization may be entering a new market or they may be launching a new product. And that initiative gets tons of marketing dollars, maybe tons of R&D dollars, maybe tons of media dollars to tell everybody about it. But culture, the cultural aspect of this new exciting thing might be more of an afterthought. And that can be super frustrating for folks who are charged with integrating and weaving and growing culture specifically within the organization. So the trap is that these highly resourced key business initiatives often happen without culture involved up front, early on. Not having culture as a second thought or an afterthought to some of these initiatives that may be well resourced and running for months before the culture team is brought to the table, if at all, frankly. And that's kind of a worst case scenario. Um, Everything we talk about, everything we write about is to help organizations elevate the profile and understanding and resourcing that's driven towards culture inside an organization. And no surprise, we talk about this in the book. Um, the fix here is to routinely align with leaders outside of culture and just begin to evangelize the message, or continue to do so. I'm sure a lot of people have been saying this all along, is that all missions do better when there's people on board. So, to us in the space of people and culture, it's kind of like a head scratcher why culture may be an afterthought or a separate thought when all these well-resourced business initiatives are being planned and put together. But that is our task right now, is to get out there and make sure that we're at the table and we're showing that, hey, if you involve the cultural impact as part of this initiative, that can be as simple as communicating things in the right way. Or, you're making a big marketing or media event about this. Let's make a big cultural event of this and let's support it in all of these different creative ways and get people on board and understanding and increase adoption and excitement. That's why we dedicate so many chapters in the book to making that happen. And you'll find that you'll actually be able to carve and pull out budget resources that maybe you didn't even know existed. You might see your culture budget explode or expand around this key business initiative because these are already well-resourced initiatives that are happening. So you can kind of ride along with that and increase the impact through your role by being part of that budget that's already been approved and is ready to be rolled out. Okay, the next and last pitfall number 10, is something that I think it's time to really talk about now in terms of where we all are in the culture space. Mentioned before, we've had a few years now where culture is, I always use these words, finding its footing inside an organization. all of the tools and the fixes that we talked about today, if you'll notice, they are action steps. They involve communication, they involve getting out there and engaging with others in the organization. And that's going to be amazing feedback for you for this. Pitfall number 10 is not prioritizing your career path in people and culture. So the trap is that, letting things find their space and being maybe too passive or too reactive in your role for too long limits your own personal opportunities. So on one end of the spectrum, it's like everything you do everywhere is like, ramming culture down people's throats to an audience that doesn't want to hear it. That's one end of the spectrum. That's a bit extreme. The other far end is what we talked about before, is kind of keeping culture under wraps or shying away from conversations outside of your team. You need to be in a really happy balance in there where you feel within yourself you're not being overly passive or reactive in your role. You're not just waiting for the organization or the executive to tell you what your budget resources are going to be for the year. You can have some of those conversations using some of the tools and action steps and frameworks that we like to talk about to advocate for expanding that. So let's bring it back to the pitfall here, because the impact is on you, on each and every person on this call, is that the fix to make sure you are prioritizing your career path and culture is to stress test the support for culture in your organization. Now, you may be already in a role at an organization where culture is taken very seriously and the organization puts its money where its mouth is in terms of funding and resourcing the initiatives that you're being tasked to do. If that's the case, excellent. Then you are prioritizing your career path because obviously you're supported. But if you're not seeing that, it really is important to start to stress test the support. Does the culture support come easily when you try and go out external to your team and have some of these conversations? When you're looking for budget and support for the kind of programs that you really want to do? Are people on board? Are the decision makers on board? Are the executive on board and open to that and not just giving it lip service? Or is it more like pulling teeth? Or just as challenging, does it kind of fall on deaf ears? Did people who are in a position to help you further your cause kind of listen and then not do anything about it? Or you find you're making some traction? If you do some stress testing and you realize that this is really hard, this is really difficult to get the kind of support that I need to do my job, then that's great feedback. And we've had people that have talked to us a little bit about that, just, from an advice perspective, saying, not really getting the feedback, the support, the uptake that I thought I would be getting when I was hired for this role. So obviously that's a place for reflection and being really honest with, is there a career path here for you in this role, in this organization? Or would you be better suited to find a role in your next opportunity where you're going to get the support and resources that you need to do your job? The little decal there just shows a culture wheel because the whole book is about that. If you put those tools together, you'll get tons of feedback. You will get your stress test, believe me. So I want to begin to kind of wrap up by just saying that, I think we're in this age of culture's coming of age. Culture teams, departments, positions, and roles right now are going to be what you make of them at this moment in time. And like I said before, culture can be one of the most creative and rewarding of roles. And I would love to know that you're somewhere that offers you a pathway for your passion for people. So I'm going to hand it back to Zach. I just want to have one or two slides to say, please connect with me or send me a note if you want to connect, chat, go over anything we talked about in the webinar or indeed anything in the book. I'm happy to do that. And just a reminder where you can find a free copy. And also, we like to give our CultureCon friends a bit of a discount or a deal on one of the um, high value but easy engagement ways to get involved working with us, which is a 4-week one-on-one consulting program where I'll sit and work with you and help you build your best culture plan. So there's a secret little link there, cultureshape.co/culturecon. If that's something that's interesting, you can find details there. And with that, I want to say thanks and hand everything back to you, Zach.
Awesome. Thanks again, Pete. Really appreciate it. Yeah, we have a couple minutes for questions. So if you have any questions, feel free to throw those in the chat. Um, yeah, I loved all the actionable takeaways. Got my Culture Wheel playbook right here. So definitely, if you didn't grab one during the presentation, try and download the free version there because as you can see, there's a lot of actionable insights that you can take back and start using at your organization today. So yeah, thanks again, Pete. Really appreciate it. You may have mentioned this during your call, but is there a pitfall that you run into the most?
It's a great question. I think they all kind of hang on uh, shying away. So I would say numbers three and number five is keeping culture under wraps,
Hmm.
and I would say shying away from the numbers. And that's not a derogatory statement.
Yeah.
Th this is, like we said before, culture finding its place. Um, in lots of organizations, culture departments aren't as big and resourced as the marketing and finance and R&D or RT or IT teams. So it's like it really is a very special time in this role. But I think that it's going to get more of a higher profile and higher resourcing when we get out inside organizations and have those conversations. So I would say really pay attention to what am I doing proactively to raise the profile of culture here.
Yeah, definitely. I see one question here from Will Smith. He is asking any advice for organizations with a strong culture, but in which there's resistance to taking a more conscious, intentional approach to the culture.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say contextualize that. 99 times out of 100, when you talk about resistance, it's someone in a position of authority who has, in fairness, um, business responsibilities to deliver on. So that always ends up trickling down to it's important to us, but we don't want to fund it. Like I'm being really candid now. And maybe they're just not in the habit of funding it routinely. And it sounds like this is the case with this question. So you really have to contextualize that with the sentence that we showed earlier about linking your culture budget to the salaries expense of the organization, which shows you why you're spending that money. You're preserving that talent expense and the revenues. You're preserving the company's ability to make money, to make
Yeah.
revenues. We have to say we have to talk in this way. And what you're doing there is you're saying, let's just have a business conversation, just on pure business alone. If we don't resource effectively our culture, we're going to run into things that make the salary expense go higher, turnover, absenteeism, things like that, and make the revenues go lower.
Yep.
Turnover leads to more training, people who were experts in their role leaving the organization and bringing maybe the customer list with them. So it's different in every organization, but don't be afraid to bring it to a business level language conversation and talk about a stress test. If you bring that to the table and you're still getting pushback, okay, you're finding the outer edge of what you can actually influence in this organization. That would be my advice.
Good advice. And I see actually a couple of questions that are related from Matthew and Vicky, and I hear this one a lot too. They're asking, how do you handle when leadership claims to buy in, and reality is that not all leaders make it a priority to understand how much influence they actually have on culture?
That's a great question. I would say one thing the I often I'm directing folks back to the same strategy. So this is a prior, this links to the prior question. So if you have an audience with these leaders, you need to get in front of them and have these conversations and link it to the business realities of the organization. If you personally in your role don't have an audience with some of the people that you're getting resistance and pushback from, like the company leaders, then you need to have the conversation with your boss and find who in the organization does have that audience. And that's the person that you have an audience with to say, here's what I'm trying to do. I really need your help. And maybe you and your boss can, you know, double up on that. But you've got to, you need support from someone. So find that ally and together help take this messaging using all of these strategies outside of the culture role. And here's your stress test, right? If you do this, you are going to get feedback. And so it's the same answer. And if you're not sure, by the way, I should say, if you're not sure about some of these numbers, just get the digital download because it gives you some little math formulas to do to equate reasonable benchmark numbers for budget conversations.
Definitely. Yeah, I feel like having that those numbers and those data points always help with the conversation because it's like it grounds it, it's real. Maybe someone who's a CFO or a CEO can like tune into those numbers and have a real conversation around the challenges that you're trying to solve with some of these initiatives.
Yeah.
Mind sharing the digital download link one more time? We had a question in the chat about that.
Yes, sir. Let me just point. I'm going to type this in right here.
Awesome. While you're doing that, I think that's a good answer to end on. We're right at time, and yeah, very engaged group today. So thanks again, Pete. I think a lot of the actionable insights resonated with our Culture Geek community, and yeah, appreciate everyone joining in on this month's CultureCon webinar. And there's the link one more time to download cultureshape.co/playbook. Grab your free copy of this book here. It's a good one. So thanks again, Pete. Really appreciate it. And we'll see everyone again soon.